The following program is a presentation of BaseNet Internet Television.
Hello everyone, and welcome to BaseNet TV's Election Central and a After Dark special report, Super Tuesday primary coverage. Joining us tonight a little later on will be BaseNet international political correspondent and the host of Viewpoint, Tony Mizuko. Also, the co-hosts of As We See It, Fred Boaz and Larry Marks. From Boston, I'm Ed Jupin. Now, let's see what's happening after dark. So, Tony will be joining us a little later. Fred and Larry, welcome aboard to our Super Tuesday coverage.
Thanks, Ed.
And Fred,
nice to be here.
Okay, Larry. And Fred, I guess you're in a state that isn't included in the festivities here of Super Tuesday.
Well, I'm going home.
Hold on, and we'll get to your thoughts in a minute. Larry, your state did vote today, or is voting right now. There's about an hour left for the polls as we're recording today. Without necessarily giving us your choice, did you vote today?
Oh, yes, I voted.
Oh, great. Well, that's good to hear. I did as well. I'm also here in Massachusetts. I'm sure he did.
Oh, yeah.
So Larry, what's the most important thing to you is we all vote for president this time around?
I think, well, what I'm looking for in the person who's elected president is someone who will look out for the American people instead of big business.
Well, hold on a second, Larry. The guy who's in office now claims to be doing that, and if you look at some of the things he's doing, he is looking out for people. The problem is I think he's going about it the wrong way.
Maybe now he's looking out for the American people.
And Romney, as a big businessman himself over the years, you know, he's been talking all through the primary season now about how he's not, in air quotes, a politician. He's a businessman. Now, I'm not asking you whether you're endorsing Romney or not, but I'm just throwing his name out there. You know, how do you feel about him as a businessman?
As a businessman, you know, he knows something, you know, about getting stuff done and also keeping his eye on the finances, too.
Okay, Larry, let me cut in here for a second. As we're recording this show on Super Tuesday night, BaseNet TV is projecting Newt Gingrich to win Georgia.
Yeah, as I was saying, Mitt Romney, you know, as a businessman, is, you know, interested in, you know, a lot of things, but he also watches the books too, and he watches the finances, unlike...
Now, you being a lifelong resident of Massachusetts, what did you think of his 4 years as governor?
Oh, I felt his 4 years as governor was good. He didn't go overboard quite like our current governor, Deval Patrick, when it came to transportation and getting to the State House.
Yeah, but Larry, didn't Governor Romney at the time introduce something very similar to Obamacare in Massachusetts?
Yeah, Romneycare, absolutely. That's what we're all paying for now. Mandatory insurance in Massachusetts.
And I don't have a problem with mandatory insurance. I think that the insurance industry can be not regulated in such a word, but told this is what we want to do, this is how we want to do it, and you guys are the experts, you guys handle it and get it done with that kind of government guidance, but keeping government out of the insurance business itself.
What Obama was trying to push, and it sounded to me as though...
Well, not trying to push, he did. Obamacare was passed, which Romney says he will repeal as soon as he becomes president, if he does.
Which has some implications that people have to be very careful, because part of Obamacare allows minor children living in a home to be covered by their parent insurance up until the age of 26.
Oh, I'm sure there are good points to Obamacare, as there are good points to Romneycare in Massachusetts.
If you repeal it, out repeal it, you can kill all of that as well, and you don't want to do that. You want to go over the piece, go over it page by page, line by line, as it were. Take out what you don't want, keep what's good, expand on what's good, and create a system that actually works.
Right, because to me, it sounds to me as though Obama just started working on this, and to me, it sounds as though he has this attitude. Well, whether you like it or not, you're going to take it.
That's the
Period.
exact attitude he has, and the problem with that is doesn't involve health care. It's a power play.
And then it was also that another part of it where he said that religious affiliated institutions had to provide free contraceptive care or whatever it's called. And he also felt that these religious affiliated institutions are going to have to offer this whether they like it or not, and that's wrong.
Oh, you're absolutely right. That is wrong, but that's not actually part of the original Obamacare piece. That is actually an add-on later on, and that creates a lot of problems, a lot of issues, and things like that. You shouldn't be mandating to religious groups or non-religious groups how they're going to do it. I mean, we're going through that now with with this 31-year-old college girl who claims that she can't pay for $3,000 worth of contraception. Well, that's ridiculous. They got to 3 condoms a day. So why is she not worried about studying? But the idea that you're doing what they're doing is wrong.
Very true.
So, Fred, I'll ask you the same question that I posed to Larry. This election cycle, what's most important to you as we choose a president?
What I'm looking for is somebody's going to go back to the basics of what our founding fathers tried to create when they created this country back in 1776. Now, there are differences between then and now. We all know that. But there are certain premises of what they wanted. They wanted a country with smaller government, less interference in people's lives, allowing the citizenry to make the decisions of what they have, where the power was in the hands of the people and not in the hands of the leaders.
Well, welcome to the Republican Party.
Well, I am a leaning
small government and states' rights.
But this is what the original founding fathers wanted, and what happens is that when you go away from that creates problems, because at that point, one state allows one thing, the federal government allows something else, and which one goes through?
Larry's way?
Actually, probably not what the American people want, but what the government wants.
Usually.
And as Fred was just saying...
How many times have we talked on all of the BaseNet shows over the past year or so how people's votes or decisions have been overturned by the government?
Sure. I mean, take, for example, the voters in California who voted to amend the Constitution, and guess what? They just went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, who said, no, the voters don't have a right to be heard.
I wish we had Holly here today to discuss her favorite court.
Well, did she bring a laptop with her to China?
She may actually be doing some...
She'd probably get better internet service.
Filing a report for at least crashing glass while she's over there. She'll be gone another week yet.
The thing is, and that bothers me about the whole thing, is that we have a government now, right, up until recently, that the will of the people is being ignored for...
That's Larry's point.
I know, I'm saying, but when 65% or 52%, we had this sort of discussion on As We See It, when 52% of the people say yes or no, that's where the representatives are supposed to go. They're not supposed to say, well, the people don't know, so we're going to take it to court and see what they say. And that's what we've gone to. We've gone to the point where we don't run, where the government runs us, we don't run the government. We have to get back to get it back to the basics of the fact that we run the government and tell them what we want them to do.
Take, for example, what happened here in Massachusetts. And I know we don't want to get into a whole big discussion about this, but I'm just going to bring it up and then we can just move on to something else. The subject of legalizing same-sex marriage in Massachusetts. That question has never appeared on the ballot in Massachusetts because they don't want it.
Right, it was just force-fed to the people.
That's right.
Well, we got to remember that everywhere, and that's the 52% that I'm talking about, every time it's come up, it's been voted down and winds up going to court and become legalized. Then the court goes in, it goes for referendum, gets voted down, goes back to court, they vote it in, they write it in, goes back to the people, they vote it down. What part of no don't these people understand? I mean, what would people do if 52% of the people said, yes, we want it, and the court keeps saying, no, you can't have it? I mean, it's the same thing. And Larry brings up, brings a lot of good points with this. This happened in other things, like, the idea. It's Pennsylvania just enacted as of, I think it's tomorrow. It's a $50 fine, primary crime for texting while you're driving. Well, first of all, it's moronic, but why? There's going to be people who are going to be challenging that law that the governor just signed into effect And they're going to be saying that you have a right to text while you're driving. That's just moronic. And, of course, it's going to go to court. People said no, they don't want it, so stop.
Mm-hmm.
No, I say, you know what? There's nothing wrong with a $50 fine if you're caught texting while driving, because to me, it's always been the minute you get behind the wheel, you fasten the seatbelt, you start it up, and it's always been your hands are 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Both hands are always supposed to be on the steering wheel, not.
Well, I've certainly never driven that way.
Neither have I, but the thing is that what happens, I'm driving home from the office today, and I got the Bluetooth in the little bug. I keep getting yelled at because it winds up facing down, but I'm driving down. I counted 10 cars. The people are on the road talking on the phone, not paying attention to their driving, weaving around their lane. You look at them, and they look at you like I'm an idiot, and I'm able to take phone calls and do what I have to do from the Bluetooth. So why not do that? That should become mandatory. Now, if the government wants to get a regulation, how are we regulating that? You have to have a Bluetooth, or you get a $500 fine.
Just like going back to the seatbelt law, which has been the law in most states for 20 years now or so, it's just too hard to enforce. These cell phone texting or talking on the phone laws, along with even the seatbelt laws. I think seatbelt laws are a little easier to enforce. It's kind of easier to see somebody whether or not they're strapped into a seatbelt. A cell phone they could have on their lap, unless you're physically looking in on their lap, you don't even see the phone. So I think that's the problem. It's just, and I haven't been told it personally, but from reports that I've read online, police officers even say that. They say, we can't enforce this. You can't see these people doing this.
The only ones you can see are the ones who actually have it up against their heads, and those are 10 or 15 I was talking about.
I just happened to read about a 17-year-old in Rhode Island was going to drag racing in his car with another driver, and he was
He or
on the
she,
phone.
the girl you're talking about?
There
was a girl that was killed while texting.
This is the fellow. His name is Lyle Topa. He's still walking around.
Okay.
And he's 17, and he was at a party, and he was drinking. He was either drinking hard liquor or beer, and then after that, he got in his car and he went out, and he was drag racing with someone in another car, and he drove his car into a tree. The car is totaled, and a judge in Rhode Island has said to him at the age of 17, because of the way you drove your car.
Oh, yeah, I saw that story. He lost his license, or he's revoked for life.
You can forget about driving because you're banned for life.
Yeah, they revoked his license for life.
And that's going to get overturned. We all know
sure
that.
It will. Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to get overturned next year when he turns 18 because they're going to consider it a minor crime. That he was a minor
when he was a minor at the time, and they'll say,
they'll give his license back. But
yeah, they're going to say it was too strong. Yeah. Yeah, and then the story I was talking about, it was being reported on the media today. A teenager, college-age girl, same thing, crashed her car into a tree or something while texting, and was killed, though, unfortunately. And, of course, the mainstream media, who was interviewing her parents, they have no class, half of these mainstream media reporters, and they're asking the parents, well, aren't you teaching your kids that they shouldn't be texting and driving at the same time? And the parents are just like, they're kids. Yes, we're teaching them, but this is so prevalent out there. It's just a sad story.
Now parents are going to sue the cell phone company for not locking it up in the car.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, the thing is that people have to understand. Getting back to the Super Tuesday, you have to understand something. That voting is not only a right, but it's a sacred trust, and it isn't for me. It's for the good of the country. We understand that when you look, and I've been in college classes where they've shown us how socialism is a workable form of government on paper, and in academia it works.
Oh, in theory it works. Sure.
The problem is that these people never figure in the human element of, wait a second, I'm working and he's getting for free. Well, I'm going to go get for free, and now you shut the whole system down. But they don't go that far.
Yeah, because nobody's working. I
had a college professor who could swear, he would show you in mathematical terms that socialism works, and it does, providing you leave the human element out of it. people forget that when you look at history, you have to look back on history, how things start, how things develop, and you have to look at the governments from the past and what happened. I mean, when you look at when I looked at signs that were anti-McCain, and I was no McCain fan, but it said anybody but McCain. I thought to myself, well, in the 1960s, we had anybody but Bautista, and he wound up with Fidel Castro. Anyone but the Kaiser wound up with Adolf Hitler. Anybody but the Tsar wound up with the communist government in Russia. So, anybody but is not always the best way to go. You can't say anybody but Obama and wind up with somebody worse.
Right, exactly. Happen. Absolutely.
And people have to understand this, that when you're out there, you have to look at history and see what happens. Now, I've gotten yelled at by people aligning, not really aligning, but showing a similarity between Obama and Adolf Hitler. And not in the way of the genocide that occurred later on, but the fact that Adolf Hitler in 1931 was legally elected Chancellor of Germany. He made promises to the people that he kept. He made the trains run on time. He brought Germany back up to a world superpower. He had the pride of the Germanic people, and then attacked Poland. So, nobody in 1931 thought that this little house painter from Austria was going to attack Poland in 1939, but it happened. And, we can say anything we want to about Obama, but he was a junior senator from Illinois with 3 years political experience that was backed by Hollywood and Oprah, and that's how he got elected, because they simply had the power and the money to trash anybody else in office. And without being called a racist, which I was, I asked a lady one time who walked into my office with a big Obama button one time. I asked her, I said, look, I said, I'm at this, and I told her I wasn't sure who to vote for at the time. And I asked her, I said, what 3 things did he do that qualified him as president? She started talking about John McCain, called me a racist, and still never answered the question.
BaseNet TV is now going to project Mitt Romney as the winner in Virginia.
That's easy enough. Obama was a third-year senator, a junior senator from Illinois. How did he get elected? Because he had the support of people who never really had the information about who and what he was. And when people like Oprah come out and they say, this is what you want, this is what we need, people are going to take that because they trust her.
I also think that Obama was almost a anybody but situation, like you discussed earlier. McCain just even more so than, say, Romney now, the presumed front runner at this point. McCain was just not liked by the masses. Yes, he was liked by the Republican Party at the time 4 years ago. Right. I'll give you facts. Romney's numbers, even right now in early March, McCain in early March already had 1,500 delegates on his side. He already had enough to clinch the nomination in March. The Republican Party was behind him. Romney right now is at only 210 or so, at the point in time when McCain already had over 1,500. But that was my point. McCain had the Republican Party behind him, and he had already enough delegates in March to clinch the nomination. However, the people, again, the voting public just wasn't buying into McCain. I don't know if it's like the Ron Paul syndrome of, this cranky old man, because McCain was already 72 years old or something. Here's this cranky old man that we need grandpa as president, as opposed to having the 47 or so year old guy at the time in Barack Obama.
Well,
and I think that's what brought Barack Obama in.
You see, I keep telling people I was never, and you know this, that I was never a McCain fan in the first place. I didn't like a lot of what he stood for, a lot of what he did. But you have to go. My point of what I was saying is that when you go into someone's background, you have to go to how they vote, what they say, what they do, their associations.
Oh, no, Obama didn't have a track record, but that doesn't disqualify somebody, in my opinion, as I see it. That doesn't disqualify somebody.
It doesn't, because the only qualifications to run for president, you have to be 35 years old, a natural-born citizen, and have been a resident of the United States for 14 years. That's it.
Right.
And then you're qualified to run. And that's in the Constitution. Nothing else is about it, but that is. And what happens is that people forget that, back when Obama ran, people maligned Sarah Palin for having no foreign policy experience, running for the number 2 seat, when Obama had no foreign policy experience running for the #1 seat.
Right. Same thing.
That bothered me because how do you make that statement? And this is where I had a problem with a lot of the Obama supporters. I made that statement and I got called a racist. And I said it had nothing to do with race. I would have backed Andy Young. I would have backed a lot of black candidates if they fit the mold of, hey, you got foreign policy experience, you've run a company, corporation, state, whatever.
You know, ironically enough, I had no problem 20 years ago or whatever it was now if Jesse Jackson would have been a viable candidate for president. I wouldn't have had a problem with Jesse Jackson.
Jesse Jackson actually might not do a bad job.
Right. You know, because there was talk, many years ago about him. I wouldn't have had a problem with Jesse.
And the problem with a lot of these candidates, even let's say the Reverend Jackson for a moment, you get into the power of president. You can't just go by one side or the other. You have to look at what's best for the people. I think that in that position, he might just do a very good job and say, this is not what's right for all the people, and I'm representing all the people, because even though he represents the people he represents, his Rainbow Coalition, he does a damn good job of representing their interests. Whether I agree with him or not doesn't matter. Right. But he does a very good job of representing them. Always be about this administration. They're going completely against what the people want.
In what respect?
Well, again, 63% of the American public did not want Obamacare, and they pushed it through anyway. 52% of the American public.
All right, I have to cut in on you again a second. Hold your thought.
That's okay.
BaseNet TV is now projecting Mitt Romney, no surprise, to win the Vermont primary.
That was no surprise. I've gone with 36%. Anyway, but like I said, again, they're going and it's not, and we got to stop. I mean, yeah, Obama's at the top, but it's more than just him. It is actually the senators and congressmen that we have in office that are supposed to be doing our bidding and presenting the. If you present a bill to the president that he doesn't like, he's going to veto it. You can take it back and override his veto, but. As long Obamacare went through because there weren't enough votes to stop it, and nobody in the Democratic Party had the balls to say no. The people don't want this. We're subject to their will and not our own, and that bothers me. It bothers me because that's not the way it's supposed to be. And maybe I'm living in a dream or fantasy world, but that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's not the way it was set up. And we're changing the fabric of what this country is. I mean, I talk to kids who are in their teens, and they're going, yeah, I like the idea. I like the idea of everything being supplied to you. Wait a second. Somebody's going to pay for this somewhere. And they're, that's okay. We'll get the money someplace. How are we getting the money? There's nobody working, and everybody's getting free health care. And nobody's working. Where are we going to get the money for this? And finally
that's one of the things among many that did in the Soviet Union.
That's right.
That was, what more proof positive do you want that socialism doesn't work?
And that's what I try to tell people. If you don't look into history, you're destined to repeat it. That's part. When this country was formed, the founding fathers, yes, and again we had this discussion with Holly that when you read the Declaration of Independence, you read the Constitution, the laws were written by people who were a lot different than we are now. They had a lot of different mindset. But when they talked about all men being created equal, they meant precisely that. They meant men. They didn't mean women. They didn't mean slaves, the whole bit. But you can sit there and you can look at what they also meant. They wanted a smaller, limited government. They wanted that because they were coming out of the largest government in the world, the British monarchy. At the time, the British monarchy was the largest government in the world. It had colonies all over the world. You had India. You had what became Israel. You had the largest government. When they were being taxed without being represented, they were being laws passed on them that they had no say in. In 1776, they wrote a letter to the king, the Declaration of Independence, saying we're taking this country, we're going and we're doing our own thing with it. And 13 years later, they came up with the laws in 1789. And people got to remember that this is the reason these people did it. They wanted to get away from a large government and have a government that the people ran, that rather than the leaders running. Because whenever you have government running anything, it gets screwed up. Mitt Romney would make a good president. I think he'd do a better job at running the country the way that it was intended to be run. But if the people decide they want to go into socialist and down the socialist road, there's nothing we can really do about it. They vote Obama back in, and it's going to be a signal to the American country.
Hey, you know what? If 51% of the country wants it that way, I'm going to go along with it.
But the problem is that The problem with that is because when you look at the demographic that like in Pennsylvania when they voted back in 2008 when we had to vote, the actual like Pennsylvania was declared for Obama because Obama won the state. But when you looked at the demographic,
so did Massachusetts.
When you looked at the
and same thing this November. Even if the eventual nominee is Mitt Romney, very, very high probability that Obama is going to carry Massachusetts.
Well, no, that wasn't my point. My point was when you looked at the map, you had all the cities went for the Democrats. But most of the state populace went for McCain. Now the reason being that most of your cities are Democrat. Most of the people living in the cities are Democrats, and that's where a lot of your aid goes to, a lot of your social services go to, a lot of your poor people live in these areas, and a lot, because what's happening, a lot of these people can't, through no fault of their own, can't find jobs and need a lot of these social programs, and the Democrats keep accusing the Republicans of wanting to cut the programs, but the programs are costing somebody money. And, you can't be talking about free gas, free health care, free everything, because nobody's doing anything for free. Everything costs money, and someone's got to pay for it. When you give a kid at the movie theater $1 an hour raise, that's raising from $8 to $9 an hour is a 12% raise. I've never gotten a 12% raise in my entire life. For me, a 12% raise is like $8,000. So there's a big difference. But when people like the late Senator Ted Kennedy said, well, we have to give these people minimum wage raise because you can't make a living on a minimum wage. Here's a guy worth hundreds of millions of dollars telling me that I got to pay a kid $1 more. And I look at people like Senator Kennedy and say, Senator, you're not supposed to make a living at a minimum wage. These are startup jobs. You're supposed to improve yourself and get out of those jobs.
And from Ohio, very early on, with only 1% of the precincts reported, we have Mitt Romney ahead of Rick Santorum, 39% to 37%, about a 500 vote difference, again with only 1% of the precincts reporting. But Ohio tonight is a make-it-or-breaker state for both of them. Especially with the way we've already seen Romney get Virginia and Vermont, and he's more than likely going to get Massachusetts. With the trend we already see happening, if Mitt Romney were to squeak out this victory in Ohio, and we'll be talking with Tony about this a little bit later on as we really dissect the numbers. Tony will be joining us in a little bit to give us the in-depth analysis of the final numbers. So when we rip these numbers apart deeper later on, we'll see that if Romney were to win Ohio, it's pretty much it at that point. If Santorum wins Ohio, all it's going to do is put off the inevitable, but at least he lives to breathe another day.
See, I've got him with a 70 vote difference of 37%, but it's the same way. It's Romney in the lead by 2% and 70 votes, followed by Gingrich and Ron Paul at 7% with about 330 votes. And that's, again, it's 1% of the precincts reporting. And again, like Ed said, the polls do not close for another 13 minutes in Ohio, so we'll find out about that one later on. So these guys will be closing in like 1 minute, so we'll be fine on that. Virginia, North Dakota, they're all closed. Well, North Dakota closes at 9 o'clock our time. They're an hour behind us. Or no, they may close 7 o'clock their time, 8 o'clock our time. Massachusetts, Oklahoma, Tennessee. Tennessee should close. Idaho closes later in Alaska.
All right, let me cut in here again. BaseNet TV is going to project Mitt Romney to win Massachusetts. Also, not another surprise since he spent 4 years as governor there. Your thoughts? So now, Romney, just so far tonight on what we're projecting, Romney has 3 states and Gingrich has 1.
And that's about the way we thought it was going to be. Actually, Romney...
Yeah, I'm not seeing any surprises.
Well, Romney's got Georgia. Well, Gingrich has Georgia, right? You said
Romney has Virginia, Vermont, and Massachusetts. So getting back to Massachusetts here, that we projected Romney as the winner. Right now, we're looking at... I'm going to go with CNN exit polls. They're looking at Romney at 70% and Rick Santorum in second place with 12%. That's right along the lines of a number that I saw earlier this week. We had discussed it on Viewpoint, actually. I saw, I believe it was a Rasmussen poll that had Romney at 69% and Santorum at about 18%. And the exit polls tonight, not the actual voting numbers, but the exit polls are showing those same statistics. So myself and Tony had discussed this, that Romney really could have been dead in the water had Santorum been able to pull an upset in Massachusetts. Don't forget, look back to Michigan last week. Romney barely pulled out Michigan, and that's his true home state. He was born and raised in Michigan. His father was governor of Michigan, and yet Romney barely eked out a victory there over Santorum. If Romney would have lost or even came in, just eked out a victory in Massachusetts, ultimately that could have been almost the end of the road for Romney. So by Romney winning just in exit polls, we don't have the final results yet, but let's go with the exit polls, 70% to 12%. The Super Tuesday now is all about Ohio. Again, I'm going to stick to my prediction that if Romney wins Ohio, this is pretty much it. And if Santorum wins Ohio, it's by no means over on either end. Santorum has just lived to see another day at that point. So we're going to have to wait. Ohio is still only about 1% of the precincts in, and there's only 100 votes or so separating them. But obviously, because it's so early in the results, we probably won't have any Ohio results until Tony joins us later on, assuming
Okay,
that
I
we get
Why
Ohio
is Ohio
results
so
at all.
important?
Why is it so important in what respect?
Why do they consider Ohio so important rather than New Jersey or rather than Pennsylvania or rather than Indiana or Illinois? Why
It's
Ohio?
Super Tuesday. This is the point. If you don't already have a candidate that has enough delegates already, as I spoke earlier about McCain 4 years ago on Super Tuesday, he already had it wrapped up on Super Tuesday. On Super Tuesday, Ohio is the biggest concentration of delegates. I believe Ohio has 76 or 71 delegates or something. It's by far the most of any of the states on Super Tuesday. As you've seen already, Romney leads 3-1. If Romney could win Ohio with all of those delegates, it's the biggest take on Super Tuesday. That formally, officially propels him into the front-runner status that he's had all along, but it, more so endorses that front-runner status. And it goes with what you had said earlier yourself, that he's got the momentum at that point, and the Republican Party is going to start to coalesce around him, because the infighting has to stop at some point, and tonight will be the night that would happen. Gloria Borger, a contributor to CNN, for the past 2 days, she has used the phrase, she says, the beginning of the end could begin tonight, meaning that if Romney wins as many states as expected tonight, that's the beginning of the end of this primary season, finally.
Then why not put Ohio by itself rather than grouping it with all the other 9 states on the same day? These are questions that people have asked me.
That's why they call it Super Tuesday. It's like the Super Bowl.
I said, no, I understand that. I'm just saying that there are people out there listening that may not understand why is Ohio so important. I mean, little state like Ohio, because you grouped and I understand with the
a little state like Ohio, but it's got a huge number of delegates. So, and speaking of the huge number of delegates, to put it on the same level, then Pennsylvania has about 72 delegates. And your Pennsylvania primary is until April 24th, which means it could, at this point, almost be out of the running, for seriousness at the point already on April 24th. But that day, April 24th, along with Pennsylvania, you have Connecticut, Delaware, New York, and Rhode Island. So you have 5 states going to primaries on April 24th. And I only bring up that particular date because it's Pennsylvania. So where do you think, being Santorum's home state, let's talk a little bit about Pennsylvania on April 24th, and what do you see happening there?
Yeah, that's going to depend upon how he does with
Super Tuesday. He might drop out. He might drop out by April 24th. But let's assume he's still in.
Momentum, because remember, it is New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum is liked in Pennsylvania by a lot of people. He did a very good job when he was
Well,
senator.
as Tony says, remember, and Tony, is a true conservative, so, he's speaking against his own party, in a 50-50 kind of way. He has said several times, you have to remember, Santorum won in Pennsylvania by as big of a margin as Santorum lost in Pennsylvania.
That's right.
So PA could go either way for him as far as I see and as far as what
If
Tony
he
has
doesn't
said
win
in the past.
Pennsylvania, the race is over.
Oh no! Well, that holds true with
that.
anybody. That's why Gingrich tonight had to win Georgia. You have to win your home state.
If Santorum can take Ohio tonight and Pennsylvania, that could put a hurting on Romney.
I personally would expect that. Ohio is right next to Pennsylvania. Let's assume we're going to give Pennsylvania to Santorum because it's his home state. It's a home field advantage. Well, I could almost give him Ohio because it's the bordering state, just as if, let's play that old game that you would have on like your college entrance exams or your, whatever you call those things. Ohio is to Pennsylvania what New Hampshire is to Massachusetts. They're bordering states. So whereas you expected Romney to win New Hampshire because it borders Massachusetts, you would kind of sort of then theoretically expect Santorum to win Ohio because it borders Pennsylvania. I think Romney's going to win Ohio. He's up by 6 points now. So, getting back to Super Tuesday, Sarah Palin just voted in Wasilla, and as we've been discussing on Viewpoint for a while now, her name just won't drop. There's still always the talk here, as we've been talking tonight, about about this possibly going to the convention floor. Her name, along with Chris Christie and Jeb Bush, keeps coming up. And Sarah just said tonight that, if her name was thrown in the hat at the convention, would she stop it? And she basically said no. She says anything's possible if it gets that far. So Sarah may be back. Again, we were talking just 10 minutes ago about everybody being disenfranchised here with the Republicans. If this went to the convention floor,
which it will,
and no, I think it's going to be decided before then. But let's just say if it did, and then if they were just going to go to an open floor where they start throwing in other potential names, if it's a Chris Christie or Jeb Bush or Sarah Palin, what do you guys think about that as opposed to the options? Let's say right now our options are Romney and Santorum. If it's not Romney and Santorum, and the names of Palin, Christie, and or Jeb Bush get tossed in, what do you guys think of that?
None of them.
I would say I agree. Probably none of them.
I like Christie is a halfway decent governor in New Jersey, but he's just made some very, very, very foolish decisions. I'm not going to say stupid, but foolish decisions for the state that have cost a lot of people, their jobs. You don't do that and expect people to vote for you. He disbanded the gaming commission in the state of New Jersey. That cost almost 30% of people working in the casino their jobs in Atlantic City. In Pennsylvania, when Tom Corbett got elected, strengthened the gaming commission because they want to make sure the gaming remains honest in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Jeb Bush is going to have the Bush stigma behind him. And Sarah Palin, I think she's trouble. I mean, for another 4 years maybe, but they still got that. People still have a bad taste in their mouth about Sarah Palin. Why? I don't know. But it is what it is. I don't think any one of them have a chance to go through. I really don't.
All right, let me cut in here. BaseNet TV is going to project Tennessee in the category of Rick Santorum. Rick Santorum currently about 45% to Mitt Romney's 28%. That's in Tennessee. So that's the first one of the night officially being called for Rick Santorum.
Pennsylvania, they're passing it. They're running a bill right now to the Pennsylvania State House, expected to pass, that they have to show picture ID to vote. In New Jersey, you can't ask for ID. It's illegal. I figures.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. I'd rather be asked for ID than allow me to vote 4 times. Larry, what do you think about having to show a voter ID to vote?
I happen to think that it's a fantastic idea, and to everybody who
Good
says,
for you. I agree with you.
and to everybody who says it's not a good idea, there are some people who have said, what about the people who can't afford it? Too bad.
Can't afford what?
Can't afford to buy it, can't afford to get some sort of state-issued identification like a driver's
Well,
license
first of all,
or a non-driver's ID.
voter registration cards are free. You have to register to vote. You do it your DMV. The cards will be
Not
free.
acceptable as ID, though. In Massachusetts, you don't even get a voter registration card.
Well, I'm just saying, but that's how you solve the issue. That's an easily solved issue.
Yeah, make it to where it's the law where it is legal ID.
But it has to be a picture ID voter registration card that you're registered to vote. Or the best way to do it, Larry, is very simple. In order for you to vote, you must be a citizen. In order for you to register to vote, you must prove you're a citizen. You walk in with a voter ID card and your birth certificate. There's my birth certificate. There's my voter ID card. Have a nice day. You've just proved who you are.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't need to be a $50 driver's license.
You have to understand that the idea. I made my stepson get a state issued ID card. He needs one. You need one. It's a good idea to have one. It has all your statistics on it. It says organ donor. Doesn't say organ donor. It's a great idea. My father has one after they pulled his license. He has a state issued ID.
You still need ID, right?
It's a great idea, and it's issued through DMV. It looks almost exactly like a driver's license. There's an identification card on it. It's a great idea. People should be, and for New Jersey to tell people you cannot ask for ID at the door. It's ludicrous. It's asinine. But then again, the other side says, well, if you ask them for ID and they don't have it, you're disenfranchising your vote. No, I'm not. You don't have a driver's license? Fine. It's up to you to get an ID card of some kind over the age of 18. You're required to have it anyway. So if you're required to have picture ID over the age of 18, which you are, and the state can do that, well,
you need it to vote, right?
If you can't afford it, all right, we'll find a way of getting you an ID card that you can use to vote. If voting for you is that important, we will find a way to get it to you. Most of these kids, I want Tim to have a picture ID because it's the law. You have to have it. And it makes it easier. You go down the road, let me see who you are, and you prove who you are. Okay, here's my it's a state-issued ID card rather than a high school ID or a college ID or one of those fake-looking IDs you can have. This is issued by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and it's well known what they look like. So, and they have the 21 security ID, the whole bit, and all that happens when you take your driver's license test, it converts to your driver's license. All that happens. But that's the best way to go. ID. Because not only am I proving I'm a resident, I'm proving that I'm a citizen by being registered to vote. My name is on the rosters. It's right there. The first thing they ask you in Pennsylvania, do you want to register to vote? Do you want to be an organ donor? Okay, fine, no problem. Here you go. Because I've already shown who I am. And sometimes I back Larry on 100%. When you're going for a driver's license, if you're going for a driver's license, you need to know how to speak the language. Because I've seen places where they're giving oral tests in Spanish, and the people can't make themselves understood at an accident scene.
Right. And
I can't make myself understood. I'm looking for your insurance card. What were you talking about? I have a driver. I don't want your driver license on your insurance card. But why would anybody move to a country where they cannot make themselves understood? Not that they aren't trying, can't. Mm-hmm. And that's just, to me, I would no sooner move to Russia where I can't make myself understood except saying the word vodka.
Yeah, why would you want to live there if you can't speak somewhat the language? All right, we have another projection here, Fred. We're also going to project Santorum to win Oklahoma. So he's got Oklahoma and Tennessee now. So again, as we said earlier, Romney just has no legs in the South.
I still haven't figured out why that would be. Maybe because he's a rich man.
We're certainly gonna talk to Tony about that later, and that's a question I'm going to pose to Tony. Why can't Met do anything in the South?
It might be because they see Santorum more as a country boy, more as a down to earth guy. I don't know why, but maybe they feel more comfortable with him. It may be that.
Yeah. So you were saying.
But anyway, it's important that, as an employer, you're looking for the most valuable person as an asset to your company. If you speak bilingual English, Spanish as an example, and you're living in Los Angeles. Well, if I have you as a police officer, you're the most valuable asset I have. So you can relate to the American community, the English speaking, non-Spanish speaking community, and to the Spanish speaking community. That's why bilingual police officers. You have a guy who might speak English and Korean. Well, they bring him in when there's a Korean family because he'll deal with people. Because we talked about this before, that many people of foreign descent, when they're speaking English, still find it easy to communicate in their own language. And I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem like Larry does, where you call up a customer service bureau, and I'm getting somebody in India who's trying to tell me in English his name is Sam, and I have no idea what in the hell I'm talking about. That's because the companies are saving money. But when people start, or they get nasty with me because I can't understand what they're saying. I mean, it is what it is. But you should not be denied any kind of services because you don't speak English. People start someplace.
And in Ohio now, we are all tied up at 38%. All of a sudden, things aren't looking so good for Romney here. He's projected to lose Tennessee and Oklahoma to Santorum, and now Santorum came back and has tied him up in Ohio. So at that point, where we would stand, we're not going to project Ohio for anybody yet, so I could go either way. But right now you have Massachusetts, Vermont, and Virginia for Romney. You have Tennessee and Oklahoma projected for Santorum, and Gingrich, of course, in Georgia. Ohio could still go either way, as we've been saying, and it's still only 20% or so or less than that, 15% of the precincts reported in Ohio. So it's probably going to be well after midnight before Ohio is ever decided. All right, so I guess, guys, this just about wraps up our first half of our coverage here tonight of our Super Tuesday primary coverage. Thanks, Fred and Larry, for some good, insightful discussions here tonight as we were covering the early projections that were coming in. We're going to move ahead now and welcome Tony onto the show, and we're going to move along and continue with our After Dark special report, BaseNet TV's Super Tuesday primary coverage from right here in BaseNet TV's Election Central. Once again, I'm Ed Jupin, and now welcome to the host of Viewpoint and BaseNet TV's international political correspondent, Tony Mazzucco. Tony, I guess you're going to join us now, and we're going to go into breaking down these numbers in a little more in-depth, tonight's results.
That's right, Ed. I am glad to be here on After Dark, and I do have results for everyone. I also have some predictions that I'm going to give everyone, which I usually don't do, but I'm going to give you my opinion, and it may be wrong, on how the race is going to go from here, and I'll tell you why I think the way I do. And we've reached the point in the night where we know where we know the results that are in, and we know where they're going. I guess, would you call it Super Tuesday? I certainly would. It was definitely a very interesting night. There was no clear-cut winner, and there was no clear-cut loser. Romney had a very good night. Gingrich didn't have the greatest night, and we're going to start off talking about Gingrich in Georgia, and here's where I differ with most of the mainstream media on how this is going to play out. Now, Gingrich did win Georgia, which was absolutely necessary for him to continue. Had he lost Georgia on Super Tuesday, Gingrich would have been gone. Hands down, he would have called out that night and been done with it. And he won pretty well, 47% of the vote to Romney's about 26%, Santorum at about 20%, and Paul at about 6%. But I still think Gingrich's campaign is over. And here's why.
Okay, devil's advocate. I know I'm jumping the gun, but next week we have a couple southern primaries. And then I also heard some predictions tonight about Texas, which I believe is not for another month or so from now. But they're also saying now that, whoever they is also saying that it looks like Texas might be leaning towards Gingrich.
You know, I'm going to tell you why I don't think it's going to happen. Tennessee is a southern state, and today's Tennessee primary, Gingrich didn't place first.
He did not look good.
He did not place second. He placed third. It was 37 to 28 to 24, Santorum to Romney to Gingrich. Now, there's undoubtedly going to be a boost, but remember, Gingrich represented Georgia in the United States Congress for close to 20 years, so that really is his home turf. And I think that's where it was. People knew Gingrich. They probably liked Gingrich. He was a successful congressman for, 10, 11 terms. But he didn't win Tennessee. And everyone's saying he's going to win, and I know those out there in the media, I've read some of the same predictions. They're saying he's going to win these southern states next week. I'm saying, why didn't he win a southern state this week?
Yeah, he didn't sweep the South just for the fact that he
exactly.
didn't win Florida. Remember back to that, even though we've always called Florida a northern state, and today he didn't win Tennessee.
He also
he's not sweeping the South.
Exactly. He also didn't win Oklahoma, which whether that's the Midwest, whether that's the South, whatever you want to call it, it's not Vermont and it's not Oregon
and it's not Gingrich.
Exactly, and Gingrich didn't win it either. That also went to Santorum. Santorum also won North Dakota, but I only think there's about 7 or 8 people up there. No way, don't mean to insult any of the people that live in North Dakota, but I don't see how anyone's going to say that Gingrich is going to sweep the South when he's already not swept the South. He did win South Carolina, so he's got 2 southern states, but you're comparing that to Santorum, who's now got a southern state under his belt, and Romney's got a southern state under his belt. You've also got to look at it that if you break down all the vote totals, Newt Gingrich solidly came in third on Super Tuesday. You could say it was a decisive third or a far place in third, but this man
even a decisive third in the primaries doesn't get you a nomination.
Exactly, it doesn't even get you to stay in the race if you ask me, because he's got to overcome Santorum and then overcome Romney. So even if Santorum were to drop out, which isn't going to happen, and we'll get to that, Romney, Gingrich would need to get his support and then go on to beat Romney. Now, here's why, I do want to keep talking about Gingrich, but, Santorum's not going to drop out. He came in second. The guy that comes in second isn't going to drop out to support the guy who was in third. And I think, unfortunately, Ohio is one of those states that I'm going to say is effectively a tie. Iowa, Romney won, then Santorum won, they're a tie. And from Santorum's perspective, I call that a victory. And from Romney's perspective, I call that a loss. So Santorum won 3 states outright, and I guess we'll say tied in 1. Romney won 4, and we don't have Alaska's results yet, but Romney won 4 and tied in 1, if you want my analysis. Gingrich won in 1. I do not see that he's going to come back.
The only reason I don't see it as a tie in Ohio, assuming these numbers hold and Romney does indeed win the popular vote count, he's also going to significantly win the delegate count. Santorum did not make the ballot in a lot of counties. His team screwed up in Ohio just as they did in Virginia, where he wasn't on the ballot at all. There were a lot of congressional districts in Ohio where Santorum cannot get either any delegates or a lesser amount of delegates than he should have. So even though Ohio isn't winner take all, even by splitting delegates, because his campaign screwed up in the signing up process, he's going to get a lot less delegates than he normally even would have, even coming in second place. Right. So by losing the popular vote count, if the numbers hold up, and then not getting as many delegates as he should have, theoretically, I don't see how we could call that even a tie then.
You know what? At this point, it's not about delegates. It's about the media looking at it and who they think can win. The fact that, him and Romney each got a huge amount of votes in
Well, you think Santorum
Ohio.
Can wake up tomorrow morning? Or, again, as we've been saying all night, this show, you're listening to this after the fact. But we're recording this on Super Tuesday itself. So I'm referring to Wednesday morning, the day after Super Tuesday. Do you think Santorum's going to wake up Wednesday morning after Super Tuesday and saying, oh, I tied or won Ohio when he lost the popular count and he didn't win the delegates?
I think he's going to look at it and he's going to say, Newt Gingrich got 170,000 votes, I got 440,000 votes, Mitt Romney only got 450,000 votes. And
that's a tie.
Exactly. That's why I think, statistically, it's very close to being a tie. Romney's going to want to call it a win, but from Santorum's perspective, the support is there. And if Newt Gingrich were to drop out, Santorum only needs a tiny, tiny bit of that to get Romney to be able to beat Romney. And that's why it matters. I mean, if you add in Rick Perry and John Huntsman's totals, or the totals from one of them to Santorum, he'd have beat Romney. So it's such a small margin that the support is there, and I just don't think that support is going to go for Gingrich. I think when people look at it, and to an extent, some people do say, I'm going to vote for who I think is going to win. They're going to say, this person's up in the delegates, that person's up in the delegates, that person's up in the popular vote. But wait a minute, Santorum is so close to Romney. I think, again, his campaign knows that there's 500,000 people in Ohio that support him. So I just don't think Gingrich can overcome that because, again, he's got to overcome Santorum and then he's got to overcome Romney. I mean, yeah, you can come from behind, but I think Gingrich is done because Santorum's showing he has the support that Gingrich needs. Now, Ohio does have a lot of blue-collar Democrats and a lot of the, I guess you'd say, working-class Republicans that Newt tends to draw in, and he tends to get their support. And it's evident that he did not win them in Ohio.
Didn't happen today.
Exactly. So I mean, Newt's not winning the people he should be winning. You could make the argument that obviously him and Santorum's vote totals combined beat Romney pretty handily. But again, Romney still came in first, and Santorum's still going to call Ohio very close to a victory. The delegate count won't matter yet. A couple months from now, we're going to probably have a couple of episodes where we talk about how the delegate count is crucial. But right now, it's not that big of a deal because I think people are going to look at it, and even though he didn't get all the delegates, he still got more than Newt Gingrich.
Yeah, and ultimately somebody's delegates are going to go to somebody else. So.
Exactly. And I mean, Newt may be racking up so few that, well, Georgia was a good win, but it depends on how Romney ultimately pans out. And again, I've said this all along. There's, I think a couple hundred delegates at stake in June. Actually, you know what? We can look that up right now, and I can give you guys the very specific vote total or how many delegates are up in June when I'm predicting that none of these guys are going to be around other than one candidate. And I know the mainstream media is disagreeing with me on that, but they can disagree all they want. In June, for instance, you've got California at 172, and then you've got Montana, New Jersey, New Mexico, South Dakota, and then Utah, totaling about another 150 to 200. If it's just one person in the race, which it often is by that point, it doesn't matter. But if it's just one person and Ron Paul, you're going to look at Ron Paul picking up quite a few delegates. Now, Texas, you mentioned earlier, and you said that Texas might go to Gingrich, but Texas isn't scheduled till May. May 29th, the end of Texas, and that's a huge delegate count where I would expect Paul to do well because it's his home state. In the unlikely event Gingrich sweeps the South and continues in the race, that's one thing. But Gingrich has to get through so many other primaries and stay in this race to finally get to Texas where he might supposedly win. I just don't think it's going to happen. Coming up, we've got actually on the 10th of March, we've got Kansas, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Guam. And I'm first going to tell everyone my political experience tells me nothing about how the Virgin Islands or Guam are going to go. I couldn't tell you. There's 15 votes between the two of them. Delegates, sorry.
And I see Kansas going to either Gingrich or Santorum.
Right, at 40 votes, I think it will. Unless Kansas has a big Mormon population. I don't think they do.
No, I don't believe so.
But Kansas, you're moving more into the heartland. That's where Santorum is winning. I don't think it's logical to assume Gingrich will win a heartland state when Santorum's been winning them. Santorum won Oklahoma, and I think Santorum's going to have a bigger boost than Gingrich coming into the...
I would give Kansas to Santorum.
Yeah, I probably would too. Again, the Virgin Islands and Guam.
I know nothing about. Right?
Yeah, neither do I. Somebody wants to write into Viewpoint or any of our other shows. Please tell us about the political situation on the Virgin Islands and Guam, who actually votes, how many people live there. There's only a couple 100,000 people in Guam, but there's only a couple 100,000 people in Rhode Island. But anyway, moving forward from that, March 13th, a week away, Alabama and Mississippi are the big ones that we got to look at because they're two southern states. Now, hypothetically, if Gingrich sweeps both, I don't think that's going to happen, but if Gingrich were to sweep both, he's in the race because Missouri comes up a couple days later, and Missouri already had their caucus. Big day is March 17th. And then within the next week, you've got Illinois, which is another heartland state, but it might go to Romney
which
because
should
of
be
Chicago.
Romney.
And then you've got Louisiana, which is another southern state. Gingrich really needs to win these southern states, and I don't
think
know
he
if
will.
Can. You think he will?
I think he will. I think he'll get those three. Romney will get Illinois, and then, of course, like we said, we don't know about Samoa Islands and so on.
We're going to have to agree to disagree. I don't think Gingrich is going to do that well. Maybe I'm hoping he won't do that well, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Who would you give those three particular southern? Forget Texas for now. Just talk Louisiana, Mississippi, and what was the other one?
Alabama.
Alabama. If not Gingrich, where he's from Georgia, which is basically a border state, who would you give them to?
I think they're going to go to Santorum. I don't know if Romney's going to win.
Oh, I don't think it would be Romney, but I don't. Again, we agree to disagree. I don't think Santorum's going to fly in the deep South either.
He comes off sometimes as Heartland Rick, and as they move down there, I mean, they don't really have too much time to influence Alabama and Mississippi, which, to be honest with you, Missouri and Louisiana will be really the result of who wins on the 13th.
Right.
Mississippi and Alabama, I think, would be more likely to possibly go for Santorum, because remember, he won Tennessee. So he won a southern state. Gingrich won a southern state, but he won a southern state that he was a congressman in for 20 years. Now, you could say he won South Carolina, but South Carolina was also very good for Newt in the sense that it was right on the heels of some very good victories and some very good debate performances.
And it was before Newtgate.
Exactly. It was before Newtgate. And as Newt's come out to be more of, the jerk that he is, and people tend to see that, I think that's hurt him. I don't see it happening in the South. He should have won Tennessee if he was going to win the South. Now, there are some parts of Tennessee, Nashville and whatnot, that are a little bit more affluent. And I actually think Nashville is one of the more affluent cities in the country, or the area around it.
Mm-hmm.
They're definitely more Romney-ish people. So I could see that not working in Gingrich's favor, but it's still a southern state that Gingrich didn't win. And it's a southern state that's pretty close to Georgia. Now, I don't want to offend anyone, but if you're from the north like I am and like you are, Ed, all those southern states are pretty much one thing. But, I mean, these states are right next to each other. So I just think if Gingrich was going to sweep the South, he would have swept the South today and won. But you're talking about, everyone seems to think that this man who won effectively 1 out of 9 today is going to come back and win them all. Not the guy who won, 5 out of 10 or 4 out of 10, depending on how you want to look at it. And I just don't think that that's going to happen. Now, Santorum, North Dakota, I can't tell you whether that's a heartland state or not. There have been a lot of changes in North Dakota. Huge amount of oil. I actually read recently, as a result of fracking procedures, there's more oil in the ground in North Dakota than in Saudi Arabia. So buy land in North Dakota if you can. I think, again, it's almost too small of a state. I think North Dakota has less than 1 million people. But he won Oklahoma. That's definitely a heartland state. And Oklahoma and Texas are very similar in a lot of ways. Some of the types of Republicans you have. You don't necessarily have the independent Oklahomans like you have the Texans who are, very independent and very Texan. But Oklahoma's a heartland state, and it's very close to Texas. And it's somewhat of a southern state, even though it's not really what we consider the traditional South. And that went to Santorum. So I think he's going to continue with that. Now, Romney won Massachusetts, no surprise. And I will say Romney won Massachusetts handily. I believe his actual figures were 72%. Let me pull them up here for you guys. Yeah, he won 72% in Massachusetts. Santorum 12, Paul 10, Gingrich 5, Huntsman 1. Nobody's showing vote totals for Herman Cain, which is very upsetting. But so Romney did handily win Massachusetts. Now, Vermont, he won fairly well, too. He won 40% of the vote. Interestingly enough, Ron Paul came in second and picked up a couple delegates with 25% of the vote. Santorum third with 23, and then Newt with 8, and then Huntsman and Perry with 2 and 1 each. So there's two things to look at there. One, Ron Paul doing very good compared to a Romney in a state that tends to be a little bit independent-minded. So you're still seeing that the Paul, Santorum, Gingrich totals are well over what Romney's are by about 10 or 15%. But again, Romney won Vermont by at least a significant margin. Now, Virginia is very, very interesting because I think Virginia could be a microcosm for what happens in June. Because I'm predicting in June it is Romney and Paul, unless Santorum really, really kills. And I'll get into a minute as to why Santorum will probably drop soon. I think Gingrich is going to drop soon, and Santorum will drop sooner after than that. Romney and Paul were the only ones in the Virginia primary. Now, I know you're all saying, what does that mean? Well, once again, Rick and once again, Newt couldn't get their act together and get on the ballot. I like Santorum. I somewhat like Newt, not as much as I used to. I don't really know if I want somebody being president that can't get on the ballot. But anyway, we're not going to get into that here. But it was a 60-40 split between Romney and Paul. Probably Romney's best showing outside of Massachusetts at 60%, but 40% of people went for Ron Paul. That shows there's still a lot of anti-Romney going on. And if you have California with its massive amount of delegates and all those other ones in June or possibly late May, where there's 60-40 splits, Paul's going to start picking up delegates at enough to matter. Now, why I think that's going to happen, as opposed to Gingrich or Santorum staying in, and I know the media keeps projecting out the delegate counts, but they're going to keep going in a way that Santorum is going to realize after a certain point, and it may be today, it may be next week, that he will never win the nomination the way things are going. So he's going to decide what he wants to do. He can bow out early and pledge his delegates to Romney, or he can keep fighting on, pick up some more delegates, but all he's going to do is be able to have to pledge them to Romney because he's going to be the only one close enough to actually get what he needs. Now, let's say Santorum wants to be, vice president or something like that. He's almost at the point where by agreeing to go along with Romney, he can basically say, make me your vice president, or I'm not going to go along with you. Now, if you're the Romney camp, and I don't know if Romney has anyone he's absolutely dead set on being Veep, I think him and Santorum is actually a strong ticket. And I know I've said that before, but at some point if somebody throws a feeler to you that says, hey, Santorum's going to drop out and support you in this race if you, agree to make him, behind back doors, make him your vice presidential candidate, or I don't know, give him something else that he wants, Romney's going to say, yeah, I want to get to the general election. I want to wrap this thing up. I don't think that Santorum will not do that until Gingrich is out. So it's a matter of when Gingrich goes. Now, if Gingrich goes early, Santorum might start picking up enough of those southern states. But if Gingrich stays in for the next week or two, the next 2 or 3 weeks, and even if Santorum and Gingrich do really well and Romney doesn't do that well, I still don't think they can overcome the Romney lead. So that's why I think that somebody's going to cut a deal at some point. And I think Newt, again, is going to be the first guy out. But going back to it, that's why I think Santorum at some point is going to realize that all he's going to do is still be in second place, and he'll never overcome second place. California will get split between Romney and Paul, but if it's Romney and Santorum, let me tell you something. Santorum ain't going to win in California, and he ain't going to do real well in California. By and large, all that's left in California for Republicans are your Orange County wealthy business Republicans, the same ones in Florida that are going to pick Romney. So Santorum won't be able to pull those states that far into the game. And let's look at some of the other ones in late May and June as we get into it. First of all, in April, we'll start off. D.C., Maryland, they're absolutely Romney territory. Wisconsin could go either way. April 24th, and I've mentioned this before, that's what I would call a Super Tuesday, because you've got Connecticut, Delaware, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Santorum will likely win Pennsylvania, which is a good delegate haul at 72. But Rhode Island, New York, Delaware, Connecticut, they're going to go for Romney. So you're going to look at that day where there's, let's do a quick calculation here, about 200, 220 delegates up for grabs. And yeah, Santorum might be able to get 75, 80 of them, but Romney's going to get 120 or 125. And just Santorum will realize statistically he'll never beat Romney. He's got to basically cut and run and, help Romney out. And I think Santorum he's the one who's even said that, politics is a team sport. He will come to the realization that statistically he cannot win. If Santorum had won 6 of the states today, 7 of the states, well, that'd be different. But I think it's going to come down to Gingrich will bow out pending a predicted poor performance, and Santorum will hang on for a little bit longer to make sure he's got enough clout, but he's going to reach that statistical impasse where Romney's gotten too many delegates, and he cannot beat Romney. And I think Santorum's going to bow out, but Paul's going to stay in the race until the convention. I'm convinced of that. I could be wrong, but we're going to have to see what happens. Because, again, April 24th is the real test where Romney's going to sweep those states, and Santorum's going to have trouble doing anything other than Pennsylvania.
Right.
Yep. And although I think he's going to win Pennsylvania, let's remember he's lost in Pennsylvania as well.
We talked about that earlier on our first half of the coverage with Fred being in Pennsylvania, and Fred agreed that, Santorum is lost by as big of a margin in PA as he's won.
Exactly. So, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he'll win it, but it also may be a situation where, he wins 52-46 type of situation. And yeah, that's a win, but he's only winning his home state by 6 points. You need to trump your home state. Now, Romney trumped, I don't know what Romney's home state is, but he trumped all the states that we would say are his home state.
Theoretically, right now he lives in Belmont, so he is a Massachusetts
He did vote in Massachusetts,
right,
so he
voted in Belmont, yeah.
But let's be serious. There's, I don't know, no real Republicans in Massachusetts, so who else would it really have been? But he was governor here. He's got that name recognition. So if you are a Republican in Massachusetts, you do tend to always want to vote for the one Republican because it's kind of surprising that, a Republican did anything in Massachusetts. Going with that, I think, again, and I'll have to maybe do the math and have this ready for everyone next week, the point where Santorum will have a statistical impossibility to win the nomination. It's not there yet, but I would assume it's actually getting pretty close.
And along those lines of those projections, though, I'm saying the same thing for Romney. Every projection that I've seen out to the end of August with the convention is the best case scenario shows Romney 30 or 40 delegates shy. So who is going to be the back deal? We've discussed this on our Viewpoint show. But now for our Super Tuesday After Dark coverage here, we might as well bring it up again, assuming we have some different listenership here today. Project it out then, if Romney is 30, 40 delegates shy going into the convention, what backroom deals are going to be made? Who's going to give him the delegates to put him over the top?
Well, one of the things I'll say, what a lot of people don't realize about some of these, the way some of these delegates work is some of them are pledged, some of them are unpledged. 40 delegates is enough that you could just kind of swing it without really anyone noticing, I guess you should say. Now, the problem is with it's only 40 delegates, it's who somebody's going to give them to Romney just because they're not going to care anymore. Paul will have enough delegates to make it by the end of this. Santorum will, Gingrich will. Because Romney has the most, somebody's going to turn and say, I'm going to just give you these delegates to do it. Because come convention time, Gingrich or Santorum won't be able to do it, and I don't think they'll be able to win enough delegates even combining them. And that's where I think they're making a mistake is I think Romney will have enough delegates that maybe he's 30 or 40 short, but everyone else together put combined couldn't do it. So it might just be that Gingrich has been out of the race for months at that point. And he just says, whatever, take my 125 delegates because they don't matter. And then Santorum will say, well, I've got 400 delegates, but between the two of them, they still can't pull off a victory. So I think that's going to be less of an issue. With Romney short 40 delegates come the day of the convention, somebody's going to make a deal with them. I don't think Newt wants to be vice president. I could be wrong, but I just don't think he wants to do it. I don't think he's interested in it, and I don't think it would work for him. I don't think Romney would want him as a vice president, other than maybe wanting somebody who's a little bit more familiar with the way Washington works as his vice president. But do you see Newt Gingrich being a number two?
No, just Santorum out of the current
exactly
here.
And I think Santorum is going to go for it because it makes perfect sense. You can pull in both sides of the party. You can also let Santorum in the Obama will attack him for this, but you can sort of let Santorum go off on some of these social issues and be your attack dog on those social issues while you focus on fighting the president on the economy. I mean, that makes perfect sense because remember, that's something they often like to do with vice presidents is they like to say, well, I want somebody who can hit this, who can fight this, who can be my stalwart against this while I focus on something else. Romney won't have to say a damn thing about social issues. Santorum can rile up the social conservatives. Because remember, you've got two things that you can do in an election like that. The president, Romney, or the presidential nominee, whatever you want to call him, can be out there trying to win delegates or trying to win moderates and trying to win independents and trying to win some Democrats over. And Santorum can be out there riling up the base. It makes perfect political sense. Given Santorum's age, his political career, he would make absolute sense to be vice president because he can do it for 4 or 8 years and then run for president. He's young enough that he could do it for 4 or 8 years and then come back 10 or 12 years after that and run for president. I mean, Santorum and Romney really make what I would say is a very good mix. It makes sense politically within the Republican Party, and I think nationally it makes sense too because I think there's a lot of people that like Santorum, but then he gets off on these, social issues that do turn some people off, especially people on the left. And people say, well, Santorum's not going to be president, but he's going to be vice president. I'm okay with that. I'm really electing Romney. So I think, Romney needs to pick somebody that'll rile up his base, and Santorum is it. So what does Gingrich want? I don't think Gingrich wants anything.
I don't think Gingrich wants anything.
Santorum,
no.
I think, would like to be vice president, and he would take being vice president.
Well, you remember we said that way back in some of the early debates. We had mentioned that way back when, that, hey, you know what? Santorum kind of looks like he wants to be vice president.
Yeah, and he's
said that a long time ago.
Right, and if Santorum had swept today, he could be the nominee and could be president. I think that's what Santorum at this point is going for because you're going to come to the end of this process, and let's say Santorum said, you know what, I don't want to be vice president. He ran for president. He came close. Could he run again? Sure. But I think running as vice president doesn't hurt his chances of running for president next time. And in the unfortunate event that Romney, Santorum were to lose, Santorum would still be a front runner already in the Republican Party for 4 years from now. Now he's going to contend with your boy Chris Christie. But I think that Santorum running for vice president and losing wouldn't hurt his political career. Whereas I've said before, if Hillary were to take on...
Okay, and I'm going to have to cut in. We're going to give our final projection for the night. BaseNet TV is now projecting Mitt Romney to win the Ohio primary.
Yes, BaseNet TV is predicting Mitt Romney. Viewpoint predicts that Viewpoint's calling it a tie. But yeah, it looks like Romney did pull out in Ohio. But, that's another example of if Romney had trumped Ohio outright, Santorum would be dead. because that was the race everyone was looking at. That was the one that really mattered. Romney won. It's good for him. It's going to help cement his frontrunner status, but he didn't win enough that everyone said, whew, Rick Santorum, who the heck is that guy?
It was already day after Wednesday.
Yeah, exactly.
Before it was called. It wasn't called on Super Tuesday. It was called on day after Wednesday.
Right. So Romney had an okay Tuesday and a really good Wednesday. So yeah, I think that's what I think is going to happen with Santorum. And, I was mentioning earlier, Hillary, if she were to run as Obama's vice president and then lose, her career, which is probably winding down anyway, but her career would be over. It's kind of done. But Santorum doesn't have anything to lose by being, a vice presidential candidate and losing. It could only help him. So I think that's what he's going to go for at this point. That's my own personal prediction. I guess I can say that that's the viewpoint prediction, but I think Gingrich is out. Santorum's going for number 2. We're not talking about Ron Paul, and we should be. Now, Ed, I know you and I are friends on Facebook, and I posted something recently on Facebook that a couple days ago, Fox News had said in a latest poll, all the Republican candidates lose to Obama. Right. And they put it on the screen, and they talked about it, and they said Romney, loses. Obama beats Romney 48-42, and Obama beats Santorum, 51-48, and Obama.
And today there's even updated numbers today that are even bigger. Obama beats or leads now Romney 53-43, and Santorum 53-42.
We'll get into those numbers in just a second, but then it said Obama beats Paul 50-52.
52, right?
And they displayed it on the screen. Now,
and that's when Fred just stepped out. But if we still had Fred here, Fred had said earlier tonight in our first half of the coverage the same thing about, because he also responded to your post on Facebook talking about that being the liberal math.
It's either going to be that or something. But a lot of other people posted on that Facebook comment I made. And nobody talked about the fact that Ron Paul apparently beat the president in that lineup.
Yep.
And it's possible that Fox News made a mistake, but nobody wanted to even entertain that fact. And I can't, don't you people see it? This is a shout out to the Ron Paul supporters out there. Don't give up, because the media has gone crazy and even Republicans are ignoring this. I'm sorry. It's just, I don't even understand how people wouldn't even pick up on the fact that Ron Paul won that poll. Whatever. As for the polls being close, the president being up, the Republicans being down, if you look at the history of the last few months, when a Romney or somebody has been more close to a front runner, they've done better. When it's a little bit more muddied, they don't do as well, because people looking at this poll say, oh, I don't know who the Republican nominee is. I don't know who it's going to be. The other thing you got to look at is a national poll means nothing. It's about who wins the electoral vote, number 2. Number 3, a lot of people, moderates and independents, the ones that matter, don't make up their mind until they get into the voting booth. And you know what? I think that's a good thing. I've said this before. I think that's a good thing for democracy. Yes, you should look at the issues. You should look at the candidates. You should know what's going on. But it just shows that some people are willing to look at the paper and make the decision then. Do I think this person is good? And it shows to me that, they're really voting their conscience, or they're really voting what they feel, even though they're waiting till that last minute. Because what I've always said, a liberal progressive is gonna vote for Obama no matter what. A conservative Republican is not gonna vote for Obama no matter what. So those votes won't change. It's the people in the middle that move and that switch. And no matter what the polls say up to Election Day, people actually don't decide until they get into the booth and decide. And there's enough of them that it matters. Because I tell you what, a conservative Republican is not going to get into the poll and be like, I guess I'll go with Obama. Not going to happen. Nope. A left-wing progressive is not going to be like, well, I guess I like Mitt Romney instead of Barack Obama. That doesn't happen. So don't believe any of these polls you're seeing, because you'll notice that, they were wrong with the polls in Ohio. It was Santorum was up, he's up, he's up, he's up, he's up. And then what happened? People went into the poll and they probably felt that Romney was a little bit better to win than Santorum. So they picked Romney. The same thing happened with Michigan. Santorum a couple days before was up several points. They went into the poll. No, I voted Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney won Michigan. Even though Santorum tried to come back and say it was a tie or a loss or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, I'm not too concerned about those polls, because there's no Republican candidate yet. And a lot of times they phrase those in very, very bad ways, because, again, if you're an Obama supporter, you're going to pick Obama. if you're a Gingrich supporter and you answer that question, you might pick Obama over Romney because you don't like Romney. There's a lot of psychology that goes into polling, into answering polling questions and stuff, and that's why they're not very valid. Because again, a lot of people answer polls and questions like that based on what they want somebody to think they're answering, what they want the outcome to be, not what they actually feel. And again, a Gingrich supporter might look at that poll and they'll say, yes, I vote for Gingrich. Who do you vote for in a matchup between Obama and Romney? And they say, well, I don't want Romney. I'm going to pick Obama because in their mind, and this has been proven, they think if Romney looks poorly, people will not like him, and therefore they'll like my candidate. So there's way too much psychology that goes into them. And then not to mention, a lot of these polls are conducted over the telephone, and you get a phone call and it says, hey, this is, Bill from Pew Research Center. We want to poll you about, this, that, and the other thing. And let me tell you something. The majority of people ignore those calls.
Yep.
I usually do, and I find this stuff interesting. But, who are you going to vote for? Leave me alone. So you've also got to ask yourself, who are these people answering their phones and going through all these friggin' options? An online poll is not very valid or reliable, but at least people click it really quickly. But again, somebody's making a phone call. Just ask yourself how often you listen to a phone call and you want to listen to a telemarketer. And a lot of these calls start off like that. So again, you've really got to ask yourself, how accurate are these polls? Now, if you had several polls across several different organizations that showed Obama 75 to 25, I'd probably put a bet that he was going to win clearly, but you're never going to see that. And again, don't want to throw this in again for a second time. Well, actually, I do, so I'm going to. But remember, it's what states they win and how. Because you could look at him winning California handily, but unfortunately, he doesn't win other states that he needs. That works to the president's advantage in that sense. But again, he might have 70% of the vote in California. So they ask people this question, and a lot of them happen to be in California or whatever. So it seems like the president's numbers are higher than they are. Just as you could do something that if you unfortunately poll a particularly conservative area of a state, and the Republicans are beating the president, so then they try to do a national poll. But you're talking about a couple hundred phone calls in a country of 300 plus million people. So again, don't believe what you see in the polls because they end up not being usually right to begin with, or in the end, I should say. Mm-hmm. Now. That being said, we're coming to the end of our of my segment, at least, of the After Dark special tonight. So I just want to wrap up with overall good night for Romney. He picked up wins in Idaho, Massachusetts, Virginia, Vermont, and Ohio. Santorum also good night, North Dakota, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. And Gingrich won Georgia. My prediction, Gingrich gone within a week or two. Santorum holds out for about another month and then gives it all to Romney. And then Ron Paul has fun come June. With that, I think that's our Super Tuesday coverage. I cannot wait for the news cycle tomorrow and the day after to see how this gets spun. But that is Super Tuesday in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely. And I guess you could check out Tony. I would assume next week we'll be picking up with Viewpoint on the Southern primaries just to see if Newt does or does not sweep the South and the Samoan Islands. And also keep an eye out for As We See It and Viewpoint and Crashing Glass podcast also coming up. This absolutely was a very good night for Rick Santorum, I guess, as you were saying, Tony,
yep,
and
definitely.
Mitt Romney, and I guess Newt Gingrich is apparently happy with winning his home state because now he thinks he's on a roll to win the South and the presidency, never mind just the nomination. I guess we're going to have a lot of exciting Viewpoint shows coming up over the next several weeks or several months.
Yeah, that's true. Unless Newt's trying to run for governor of Georgia. I just thought about that. I'll throw that in there.
Oh, well, I guess he just won that tonight then. I guess wrapping up our After Dark special coverage of Super Tuesday from the BaseNet Television Election Central. I'm Ed Jupin along with Tony Mizuko, and earlier on we had Fred Boaz and Larry Marks. We'll say until next week down south. We'll see you then.